beneath Antarctica. But those are always a big question mark in people's minds. So what I did was simply post an underground cavern from the Volcanoes National Park in Hawaii so that people can get a sense of what the natural volcanic shapes are like. And a lot of the information that I have posted in these most recent articles, a lot of it comes from William Tompkins. And the man, he just died a year ago, but he was an absolute genius. Are you personally familiar with him?
A little bit.
Just a little bit. Okay, well, let me tell you just a little bit that I know. As a boy, he was down at the shipyards, if I have this story correct, and he was very fascinated by the ships. And he began to make models of these battleships absolutely to scale in absolute detail. They were so incredible that eventually an admiral, took a look at his whole collection at the age of 17. And shortly after that, they tried to get him, and successfully got him into the Navy, and got him into, I'm sure he kind of grew into it, but he was involved in U.S. Navy intelligence because he was so bright. And he has something that I have always envied in people. He had a great memory. People who can just rattle off, details without any, study just amaze me. So a lot of what I've said has been or written is his coming forth at the age of 92 and sharing some of these things with, in interviews. And so he's lived with these secrets forever and ever. And he talked about how the Nazis were moving down into Antarctica actually before World War II started. And there was a man who was a very well-known cartographer, and he also served in the German army in Norway and Finland. He did a map of what Antarctica looks like beneath the ice. And you can see it's almost like rivers or inland seas that go through it. So the Nazis, or the Germans who became the Nazis, they took these, what they call fat submarines, and they could sail underneath or cruise underneath the ice in these riverways. And from there they found these creations of volcanoes, and they expanded them into an underground base that is still being used today. And they were in production during World War II, making flying spaceships. And like I said, this man, William Tompkins, I encourage anybody to learn more about him. He has a book that he wrote late in life. It's called Selected by Extraterrestrials. He doesn't get a whole lot into what we're talking about tonight in this particular book because he actually did these interviews after the book. But it is incredible what the man has done, because he went from U.S. Navy intelligence, then he went into the aerospace industry, and he ended up working at the highest levels of NASA, with well-known names like Wernher von Braun. So when he gives you information, it's not just coming from some Tom, Dick, or Harry, and his information is worthy of sincere or serious consideration. And the other article that we just posted is about the reptilian aliens helping the Nazis. And I personally find the reptilians creepy, and but according to him, the Germans or the Nazis had reptilian consultants that gave them the technology and gave them the information on propulsion, and they were constructing ships, and probably still are, in Antarctica. They also did some of the construction in Germany. Maybe the parts of it would be there, but the bulk of the construction was down in Antarctica. In that same interview, he was asked something about if he thought the Germans ever made it to the moon, and he said absolutely yes. So he said that they had developed the, I think it's called, let's see if I can remember what it is, the Andromeda device, which is based on the principles of teleportation. And in addition to going to the moon, he said, this is Tompkin again, he said that some of the U.S. spies within the German military said that the Germans actually were able to make it to some of the star systems. So there's a lot going on with reptilians and Nazis, and it's not just a thing of the past. Apparently, it's very active.
Well, I do feel, and I got a lot of flack of it from people, back about a month ago. I remember, that when they released the video of the two Navy pilots off the aircraft carrier encountering a UFO and trying to chase and catch it, and they couldn't, and all that strange stuff. But then in November, we had our Secretary of the Air Force addressing the cadets, the graduating cadets, stating the next war is not going to be a ground war, it's going to be a war in outer space. I mean, you could take that so many different ways, like, hey, Russia, United States, do the war out there. But then, our president kind of joked around about a month or two later, or actually about 3 months later, stating, maybe I should create a space force. And then about 2 months after that, you have him and our vice president, directing the Pentagon to, do the first steps of creating a new military force, the Space Force. Now, I don't know if it's...
I think it's in the opposite order. I think this I think the Space Force already exists. Reagan hinted about space wars and space technology to protect us from, those out there. We're always a zillion steps behind. I think Trump is a Johnny-come-lately, or he probably got some, I don't know, maybe he was included in some information and he couldn't keep it to himself, but I don't think it's a new idea originating with him.
Well, maybe they're doing it as a cover-up, to try to cover up some of these UFOs that's going on that maybe could be coming from our own planet. I don't know. And going back to what you mentioned, Reagan, I had the opportunity to talk to Mr. Reagan a few times because my father had a very close friend during the Korean War that served with him. That was James Gardner, the movie actor.
Yeah?
And when I was a kid, I didn't know he would come and visit my dad up in Seattle every summer. He would spend about a week with my dad and do, I guess, what guys do, run around and, whatever. I didn't know for years who he was. And then one day I was watching Maverick and, that's the same guy. And then I started, as I got older, I got to know him and got to know him really close. But I was talking, to him about, boy, I wish I could talk to Reagan. And at that time, I think I was like 16 years old, something like that. Maybe 15. Boy, I can't remember. I'm so old right now. He used to do a show for young people in our country once a month on radio, national radio. Reagan did. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call from Ronald Reagan. And we talked for about 5 minutes on national radio, which really, excited me. But then after the show was over, a couple days later, he called me up and he just talked to me for like about an hour. And I'm going, the president of the United States talking, for an hour. Then he made, the mistake of giving me a certain number I could call him back. And I talked to him like probably 5 or 6 times, over.
That's amazing.
Oh, yeah. And, and that's when I found out him and, Nancy were kind of into the occult and all kinds of strange things. But he was talking about, that he wanted to put a defensive shield around Earth and not so much, he was always joking about like nuking Russia and stuff like that. But, when he was talking to me on the phone, he said it was not so much about them, Russia, it was like them out there. And that's the impression I got really strong. He was concerned.
And if people listen to his speech when he talks about that, it's real easy to think he might be pointing in the direction you're saying, truly.
Oh, yeah, he that's what he implied to me very strongly in our phone conversation. And that really, got me going to listening to, like, talk shows and all that stuff. And that's what actually really got me into the paranormal, to be honest with you.
That might do it. That's quite a jump start.
Oh, yeah. And, I can honestly say that I think what he wanted to do and wanted to see done, they undoubtedly, he probably knew more than a lot of presidents do. I think a lot of presidents don't even know really what's going on, or if they know, they are been told, or they know better to, maybe not talk too much about it.
Well, I honestly think that they can be threatened if they say too much. I know Jimmy Carter has, said a little bit about having witnessed a UFO in the sky, and he won't say any more. He won't, get into the subject. Many times, they just want them to be quiet, and if they won't willingly be quiet, they will threaten them. They will say their family's in jeopardy.
Well,
and so there's some real strong-arm stuff that is done to keep people from talking, especially if they're people that the public might really believe.
Well, what is really scary is all you have to do is say 3 little letters to a president, JFK. All you have to do is say to the president, hey, if you open your mouth too much, you remember what happened to JFK?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would do it.
That would
do it.
That would, at least, if I was president of the United States, I would think twice of, of opening my mouth, because then you never know who's on whose side, and you're even in your own cabinet, in your own office, in the White House.
Well, the president that knew the most is no longer with us, and that was Eisenhower. And even this gentleman, Bill Tompkins, he pretty much says that things we've heard indirectly in different ways, that Eisenhower had met with what I call the good guys, the Nordic-type ETs, who were willing to help if we didn't continue using our nuclear stuff. And, of course, we just came out of a war, and he wasn't about to give up anything. And so I think about a year later, they made connections and essentially sold their souls to the reptilians.
Well, I think they probably did, because, from the standpoint, look how many people have gone missing. I've had people we talk about, like, how many people have gone missing in the National Forest, Mary. But I'm not worried about how many people really disappeared in the National Forest system. I'm worried about all the people, in our country, let alone other countries, that just totally vanish. No record of them, no nothing after they're just gone.
And even those that don't disappear, those who have said too much, find their records disappeared or vanished, so that their identity is essentially worthless. And you and I have talked before about people like Clark McClellan, and another one would be, the astronaut. Another one would be Bob Lazar. I mean, they just wipe out your credentials so that you're unbelievable.
Well, lately on the news, they were talking what Buzz said, that we never went to the moon, that there's no way we ever went to the moon, that we couldn't go to the moon because of the radiation around some belt, that we couldn't survive, especially back in that time frame. And, you can take it maybe that he was getting senile at that age, or, he was at the age where he didn't really care anymore. I mean, you get to a certain age,
you just don't care. What can they do to you, right?
Well, really, I mean, when you get up in a certain age, what, they're going to threaten to kill you? Hey, mm-hmm. I mean, hey, go ahead and kill me. I mean, my life is pretty much gone at my age anyway. But I mean, people don't get as scared when they get older. Well, some people do, but the majority of people really, at that point, they kind of like accepted life as how's it been. And, it'd be a horrible feeling to hold something back that, if it was true or not true. So I don't know. You can take a look and take a look on the internet and see what he did say. And you can go make your own decision if he's telling the truth, or if he's getting senile, or maybe he just wanted to get it out to the public that maybe we didn't go to the moon.
One of the